Hi guys, I hope you're doing really well. I hope you're thriving. I hope you are meditating. I hope you're in a spiritual community. I hope you're getting plenty of exercise. I hope you're drinking at least 8 glasses of water a day. I hope you are surrounding yourself with community and friends and love and kind people. In this video today, what I'm going to talk about is boundaries and their correlation to core values, and why, if you tend to be very empathetic and perhaps codependent, it is very difficult to learn how to set boundaries. And learning how to set boundaries and holding your boundaries and enforcing the consequences if there are boundary violations is one way that it can really help you to avoid getting into relationships with people that are manipulative, boundary crossers, like narcissists or psychopaths or sociopaths or borderlines, or just people that have very porous boundaries themselves or are boundary violators. And the more that you learn your sort of healthy boundary setting for yourself, and the more you set boundaries, enforce boundaries, have good internal boundaries and good external boundaries, the higher your self-esteem will become, because what you're really doing is you're taking care of yourself. And codependents tend to put other people above themselves. They put other people's needs, wants, desires, emotions above themselves. Codependents tend to walk on eggshells to accommodate others with people pleasing. And I think Brene Brown says that some of the kindest people that she has ever met are the most boundaried. So there is no dichotomy, I believe, between healthy boundaries and being kind. It's not kind if you're saying yes when you really mean no internally, and if you're going to get resentful later. So I think it's really important to check in with yourself and check with what your motives are. What are my motives right now when I'm not keeping or holding to my core values, or if I'm not really setting boundaries because I'm trying to people please. And these are just things to really kind of drill into and hone into and get clear on. And so boundaries what they are is they're going to help you make decisions about what you will or will not accept, behaviors that you will or will not accept. Without boundaries, like, you're floaty. You're just floating around like a rag doll, and you're sort of at the whim of the world and other people. And then if you get resentful, that's really on you, because it's your job to set your own boundaries, and only you know what they are, because your core values may be different than another person's core values. And it's really important, at least for me, to get very clear on what my boundaries are. And if you feel taken advantage of or overwhelmed, and you get frustrated or irritable or resentful, that's not being nice. That is the result of saying yes when you really mean no. Is you will probably get resentful, you'll get irritable, you'll feel overwhelmed, and then you get mad at other people. But you're the one who didn't enforce and hold your clear boundaries. And I think setting boundaries comes down to 2 main things: knowing what your core values are and making decisions based on your core values, and giving yourself gentle permission to say no. No is a complete sentence. And a lot of times it's not even just that boundaries are very uncomfortable to set, which they are, and it's particularly uncomfortable to set if you're a codependent and you've been a people pleaser your whole life. If your trauma response to the family you grew up in was fawn, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. If it was fawn, then you might have developed this codependence, this accommodating, this people pleasing, putting other people above yourself, kind of getting loosey-goosey on your boundaries because of somebody else's desires. So that's actually not nice. It's not nice if you say yes when you really mean no, because you are going to get resentful, and that is not kind. So what are your core values? A way to drill into your core values is figure out what your priorities are. What do you prioritize in life? What's important to you? And here's a list of some potential core values: authenticity, achievement, adventure, autonomy, balance, boldness, compassion, beauty, challenge, citizenship, community, competency, contribution, creativity, determination, fairness, faith, friendship, fun, growth, happiness, sense of humor, influence, inner harmony, justice, kindness, knowledge, leadership, learning, love, loyalty, meaningful work, openness, optimism, peace. These are just some potential, everyone's core values are going to be different. But you can look at your priorities in life, like what is important to you in life. And for me, one of my core values or one of my priorities is human relationships. It's really important to me that I have healthy, happy human relationships with the people in my life. Authentic, honest relationships. So I put a lot of time and energy into my relationships. Another core value I have is adventure, sense of adventure, and exploration. That's one of my core values. Honesty is one of my core values. Like I said, authenticity, honesty, vulnerability. That's one of my core values. I think it's really important for us to be able to be vulnerable, to be authentic, to tell our truth. And I actually see vulnerability as an incredible sign of strength, because you're willing to be honest, be authentic, be vulnerable, even at the risk of somebody hurting you or manipulating you or looking at you as potentially weak. I actually think vulnerability is a great, great strength, because it takes incredible courage to send yourself to relationships rather than an ambassador, right? And as you probably know, in general, narcissists lack that core value of authenticity and courage, because they don't send them their true selves to relationship. They send a representative, they send a mask, a ambassador, right? So in general, I think narcissists really lack that core value of authenticity and courage. They're on some level, there's a great deal of cowardice inside, I think, the narcissistic sort of personality type. So really dial in on what your core values are. And of course, they're somewhat subjective, but get clear on what your core values are. You might even want to write down the list and, define it. Like if you choose family as your core value, define your family. Is that your spouse? Is that your kids? Is that your extended family, your in-laws? And then consider whether your actions, your daily and weekly activities demonstrate that family is the most important thing to you. And is that the most important thing by the time and care and love and energy that you're putting into that core value or that priority? And this is going to help you to sort of drill down. And then knowing your core values is going to help you set boundaries, of course, for how others can treat you. A core value of respect requires that you give respect as well as have conversations with others who are showing you respect. Having a core value of peace might require that you learn to let things other people do go. But if you are feeling resentful about it, peace may not be one of your highest core values because you're feeling resentful, right? So look at this and think about it. In terms of, let's go back to respect. If I have a core value of respect and I want to make sure that other people are in line with my core values, if I'm in relationship with somebody who is habitually showing me disrespect in the way that they're communicating with me by being verbally abusive or psychologically and emotionally manipulative, and they're not showing me respect by treating me in an egalitarian fashion, if they need to be superior to me in order for them to feel okay and I'm the inferior and I'm accepting that, then I'm really not in line with my core value of respect, where I get to be treated with respect. I only have relations with other people that treat me with respect. Does that make sense? So really, if you think about it, like a lot of the reason why we got into or stayed in a relationship with a narcissist is because we were not in alignment with our own core values. If somebody habitually cannot treat you with respect, then you have to be willing to let that person go and to exit that relationship, because there are people in this world who will treat you with respect, and you get to choose who you have in your life. You're not held hostage by relationships. I mean, some people are, if they're, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but like if there's a gun being held to your head, okay, that's an exception. But in general, like, we choose to stay in relationships. And if we're choosing to stay in a relationship with somebody who's habitually showing us a lack of respect, then that is sort of on us, because we're not really maintaining and respecting our own core values. And I've gone over this in a few different videos, but I'll go over this one real quick, a 5-step boundary setting process. 1, know what your boundary is. 2, communicate your boundary to the other person, and when you're communicating it, also communicate the consequence if the boundary is violated. 3, ask the other person to repeat back to you what your boundary was. Check in to make sure that they're understanding what you're trying to convey to them. Ask them to repeat it. Ask them if they understand what the consequence is. And 4, hold the boundary. And 5, if the boundary is violated, then you must be willing to enforce that consequence. I'm going to give you an example of this. 1, let's say your boundary is that in a committed relationship, you are monogamous. And that means that neither party has sex with other people outside of the relationship, nor did they develop deep emotional, romantic affairs or interactions with other people outside of the relationship. You can communicate that to your partner. Hey, in the monogamous committed relationship, my core value, my boundary is that we don't have sex with other people outside of the relationship. And maybe it's even we don't watch pornography. That could be one for some people. And we don't develop emotional affairs or emotional romantic affairs with other people. You explain that to your partner, and then you say, and if the consequence for that, if that's violated, it could be that I'm going to exit the relationship, or your consequence could be, or we're going to go to therapy, or you're going to go to therapy, whatever your particular consequence is. And then you ask that person, do you understand what my boundary is in this relationship? That if I'm going to be in a committed relationship with you, then I need it to be monogamous for us to only have sex with each other. We don't have sex outside of it. We don't develop these emotional affairs, romantic emotional affairs with other people. Do you understand? And then ask them to repeat it back to you to make sure that they're very clear on what your boundary is. And then at that point, you can also say, and if this boundary is violated, then I'm going to exit the relationship, or I'm going to ask that you go to counseling and look at your sex addiction problems, or whatever the issue is, right? I mean, that's jumping, that's making an assumption and sort of jumping to a conclusion. But, make sure that they understand what your boundary is. And then you have to be willing to hold that boundary. And, if they have sex with somebody outside of the relationship, then you have to be willing to exit the relationship, which is maintain and hold your boundary. And the more and that's kind of an extreme example. There's all sorts of tiny little examples of boundary setting throughout your life that you can use that 5-step boundary setting process with others. And the more you do this, and the more you stick in alignment with what your core values are, and the more that you drill down and you know what they are, and you set those boundaries, you communicate the boundaries, you enforce and uphold the consequences if the boundaries are violated, the higher your self-esteem is going to become, because what you are doing is radical self-care. What you are doing is loving yourself enough to say, hey, you know what? My core values really matter, and I want to be in alignment with my core values, and I am going to maintain and uphold them so that I get to keep my dignity, my self-respect, and I get to increase my self-esteem. And the more you do that, man, I'm telling you, the higher your self-esteem is going to become. So this is a way, to sort of really improve your relationships. And again, if you're codependent, you grew up probably where your boundaries were either violated, you grew up in an enmeshed family, there might have been physical or verbal abuse, you might have had all sorts of egregious boundary violations, or it was just enmeshed, or the boundaries are super, super rigid and perfectionistic, and they were really walls, not boundaries. So whatever sort of, family you grew up in with or grew up in was the modeling for boundaries. And in most cases, most of us in this community did not have healthy boundaries modeled, and we did not learn this. So this is like you are getting to learn a new language. It's like learning German. I mean, you are learning a new language. It is a skill. It was a learned behavior based on your family of origin, and you get to unlearn it, and you get to replace those old dysfunctional patterns with new, really functional patterns and ways of interacting and relating in relationships. And keep in mind, when you first start learning how to do this, just like a toddler that's learning how to walk, you are going to falter, you're going to fall, you're going to stumble, it's going to be awkward. You ever seen a toddler running down the street, you'll see like they, hopefully they're not running down the street, but running, in the yard, you'll see they kind of falter and they're learning how to walk and it's awkward. That's okay. It's not going to come out perfectly. When you first do it with people that you've been doing this old dance with for years and years and years, there's going to be pushback. It's going to be uncomfortable. You are going to feel like you might feel like you're being selfish, or you just might be very uncomfortable for you. That is okay. I want you to be able to be in that discomfort and own that discomfort and recognize that you're learning a brand new thing, and it's not going to be smooth sailing, and that's okay. Do not shame yourself for faltering or for it being awkward, and it may come out really awkward at first, and that is absolutely okay, because practice makes perfect. So the more you do this, and the easier it's going to get. No is a complete sentence, and you have permission to say no to anything that isn't working for you, or anything that doesn't feel right and isn't in line with your true self, and it isn't in line with your core values and your authenticity. And I believe that the more you do this, the more fluid it's going to become, the easier it's going to become, and eventually, you're going to be speaking German. So I hope this is helpful to you guys. Sorry about the quality. I'm doing it at night and just trying to get this video in, but I really hope that you're practicing radical self-care, and I really hope you're taking some time in meditation and hopefully a spiritual community, and getting really connected to loving, kind, nurturing humans. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.